So, I recently had to deal with something no parent should ever have to. My autistic son got slapped by a crazy HOA Karen, and then she tried to have me investigated. The reason? Because I told her the HOA needed to shut down. But the only thing that actually got shut down was her reign. Let me start from the beginning. Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from today by dropping your country in the comments, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you want to see more stories about standing up to bullies. My name is Daniel Cooper. For 15 years, I worked for the FBI tracking down dangerous criminals across America. I've faced cartel leaders and taken down trafficking rings. But 2 years ago, I took a desk job for one reason: my son Jacob. Jacob is 11 and has autism. He's brilliant with numbers and loves astronomy, but struggles with eye contact and gets overwhelmed by loud noises. Sometimes he flaps his hands when excited. To me, these are just parts of who he is. After my wife died from cancer, we needed a fresh start. I found Oakwood Estates, good schools, quiet streets, and homes spaced far apart. Perfect for Jacob. The neighborhood looked flawless. Neat lawns, matching mailboxes, clean streets. The agent kept mentioning the active HOA as a selling point. She said they maintain property values and kept standards high. I missed the warning when she quietly added, "They're very particular about keeping the neighborhood orderly." I was too focused on Jacob's smile when he saw the park with a telescope platform. He hadn't looked that happy since his mom died. I had no idea that beneath those perfect lawns, Oakwood Estates was hiding a snake: Patricia Richardson, HOA president, and the woman who would make the mistake of laying hands on my son. We'd been in Oakwood Estates for just 3 days when there was a sharp knock at the door. Jacob was in the backyard setting up his telescope, so I answered. Standing on my porch was a woman in her mid-50s with perfect blonde hair and a cold smile. She wore a tennis outfit and held a clipboard against her chest. "Patricia Richardson," she announced. "HOA president. I wanted to personally welcome you to Oakwood Estates." I shook her hand and introduced myself. As we talked, Jacob came around from the backyard, excited about the stars. He was flapping his hands slightly, something he does when he's happy. Patricia's smile disappeared. Her eyes darted to Jacob's hands, then back to me. "And who's this?" she asked in a high voice. "This is my son Jacob," I said. "Jacob, this is Mrs. Richardson from the HOA." Jacob didn't make eye contact but waved in her direction. "I'm setting up my telescope," he said. Patricia's lips tightened. "Well, I just wanted to drop off our community guidelines." She handed me a thick binder. "We take these very seriously here. It's how we maintain our standards." As she turned to leave, Jacob made a humming sound, something he does when meeting new people. Patricia clearly didn't like it. "Perhaps you might want to look at the section about noise rules," she added with a look at Jacob. "Some residents value their peace and quiet." The violation notices started 3 days later. The first one was for leaving our garbage bin visible from the street. The second came 2 days after that. Our mailbox was the wrong shade of beige. By the end of our second week, we'd received 5 notices, each for increasingly small issues. One evening, I was in the front yard helping Jacob with his telescope when our neighbor, Mike, wandered over. "I see you've been getting the Richardson treatment," he said quietly, nodding toward the latest violation notice on our door. "Is it always like this?" I asked. "Only for people she doesn't like," Mike shrugged. "Patricia runs this place like it's her kingdom. Last family that had a special needs child lasted 6 months before they sold." That night, Jacob asked me a question that broke my heart. "Dad, does the HOA lady think I'm broken?" he whispered as I tucked him in. "No, buddy," I said. "She's just someone who doesn't understand people who are different." "But why does she keep sending us papers saying we did things wrong?" I didn't have a good answer for him then. But I would soon. The harassment got worse in our second month. We'd get violation notices for things no one else got in trouble for, like Jacob's bike being on our porch for an hour or our porch light being too bright. Then Patricia's son Tyler started causing problems. He was about 13, 2 years older than Jacob, and seemed to enjoy making my son upset. He'd ride his bike past our house and call Jacob weirdo and robot boy. The worst came when Jacob built a model of the solar system for our front yard. He spent days on it, painting styrofoam balls for planets and setting them up with the right spacing. He was so proud. The next morning we found it smashed to pieces. Our doorbell camera showed Tyler and 2 friends destroying it at night, laughing the whole time. I took the video to Patricia's house, trying to handle things calmly. "Boys will be boys," she said with a shrug after barely glancing at the footage. "Maybe don't put eyesores in your yard if you don't want attention." "This isn't about yard decorations," I said. "This is about your son destroying someone else's property." Well, according to Section 8 of the guidelines, lawn ornaments require pre-approval, which you didn't have, she countered. So technically you were in violation first. When I mentioned Jacob's autism and how hard the destruction hit him, she just stared. This neighborhood isn't really set up for special needs, she said. Perhaps somewhere else would be a better fit for your situation. Jacob started asking to stay inside more. He jumped at every knock on the door, thinking it was another violation notice. He stopped using his telescope in the front yard and became quieter. That's when I started talking to other neighbors. It turned out we weren't the only ones being targeted. The Garcia family had been fined for ethnic decorations when they put up papal picado for their daughter's birthday. The elderly Wilsons had received violations for their grandson's wheelchair ramp being an unapproved structure. Mike from next door showed me something interesting: county records of home sales. In the past 3 years, 8 families had sold their homes for below market value after receiving dozens of HOA violations. All 8 were purchased by Blue Sky Properties, a company owned by Patricia's husband. Their scheme was obvious: harass certain families until they sold, then buy the houses cheap and flip them for profit. When I confronted Patricia at the next HOA meeting about the pattern of harassment, she cut my microphone off. Perhaps you should focus on controlling your special child rather than making false accusations, she said loudly. Jacob was with me and heard every word. His face crumpled as he heard himself described as something that needed controlling. "Dad," he whispered, "am I really that bad?" I'd kept my cool through everything else, but seeing my son's spirit crushed by this woman's words? That crossed a line. The annual Oakwood Estates Spring Festival was the biggest community event of the year. Jacob was excited because they were having a science fair section, and he built an amazing model showing how eclipses work. The day started well. Jacob's display got lots of positive attention from other kids and parents. He was smiling, something I hadn't seen enough lately. Then Tyler showed up. While I was talking to another parent, he accidentally bumped into Jacob's table, making the model wobble. Jacob steadied it just in time. "Careful there," I called over, and Tyler backed off, but not before giving Jacob a look that said he wasn't finished. 20 minutes later, there was a crash and shouting. I turned to see Jacob's display knocked over, pieces scattered everywhere. Tyler was pointing at Jacob and Patricia was rushing over. "He pushed my son," she shouted, though Jacob was nowhere near Tyler. "I didn't," Jacob said quietly, kneeling to pick up his broken model. "I was just showing how the moon blocks the sun." "Don't you lie to me, you little?" Patricia's voice was sharp with anger. She grabbed Jacob's arm to pull him up, and when he instinctively pulled away, he hates being touched suddenly, she slapped him hard across the face. The sound echoed across the suddenly silent festival grounds. Jacob froze, his hand going to his reddening cheek, eyes wide with shock and fear. "Don't you ever touch my son again," Patricia hissed at him. I was there in seconds, putting myself between them. "And don't you ever put your hands on my child," I said, my voice deadly calm. Patricia backed up, suddenly aware of the crowd watching. "He attacked Tyler. Everyone saw it." "The only person who attacked anyone was you," I said. "And there are about 50 witnesses." "This isn't over," she threatened, grabbing Tyler's arm. "Your type doesn't belong here." As they walked away, I knelt beside Jacob, who was shaking but not crying. "You okay, buddy?" He nodded slowly. "Dad, why did she hit me?" "Because she's wrong, not because you are," I told him. "And she just made the biggest mistake of her life." That night, after Jacob finally fell asleep, I sat at my desk and opened a drawer I hadn't touched in months. Inside was my FBI badge, credentials, and the notebook I used for case files. Seeing my son slapped for simply being himself had flipped a switch inside me. I wasn't just an angry dad anymore. I was an FBI agent with 15 years of experience taking down criminals far more sophisticated than Patricia Richardson. I pulled out a fresh notebook, wrote "Richardson case" on the cover, and began methodically laying out everything that had happened since we moved in. Dates, times, witnesses, evidence. My phone rang early the next morning. It was Mike from next door. "2 police cars just pulled up at Patricia's house," he said. "She's talking to them and pointing at your place." Sure enough, 20 minutes later, those same police officers were at my door. Patricia had filed a complaint claiming I had threatened her with violence after she defended her son from an attack. I stayed calm, invited them in, and showed them the doorbell camera footage of the incident that a neighbor had shared with me. They left with a much different understanding of what had happened. But Patricia wasn't done. That afternoon, every neighbor received an email about a dangerous resident with anger issues in our community. She didn't name me directly, but it was obvious who she meant. "Dad," Jacob asked that night, "are we going to have to move again?" "No, buddy," I said. "This time they're going to have to move." I approached this exactly like I would any FBI case, methodically and thoroughly. First, I requested all HOA financial records as was my right as a resident. Patricia tried to block it, but I cited the exact state laws that required disclosure. The records were enlightening. Selective enforcement of rules, unexplained administrative fees, and financial penalties that seemed to target specific families. I cross-referenced every violation with the county property records. The pattern was undeniable. Next, I quietly connected with other families who'd been targeted. The Garcias had kept all their violation notices. The Wilsons had emails denying their request for the wheelchair ramp. Each family added another piece to the puzzle. I discovered that Blue Sky Properties, Patricia's husband's company, had bought 12 homes in Oakwood Estates over the past 5 years, all at below-market prices after the families received countless HOA violations. I built a case file that would make my FBI supervisors proud, organized, detailed, and damning. This wasn't just petty harassment, it was housing discrimination and financial fraud. Meanwhile, I taught Jacob to document everything. When someone isn't playing fair, I told him, the best defense is the truth with evidence to back it up. Patricia must have sensed something was happening because she escalated her campaign against us. Police showed up at our door again, this time with claims that I had stalked her at the grocery store. Fortunately, I had been at work during the time she claimed, with plenty of witnesses. The social media attacks grew worse. The neighborhood Facebook group filled with posts about unstable elements in the community. Some neighbors began to avoid us. Then came the ultimate threat, a certified letter stating that due to repeated violations of community standards, we were being fined $5,000, and if not paid within 30 days, a lien would be placed on our house. Jacob saw me reading it. "Are they going to take our house, Dad?" "No, buddy," I said. "They're just making noise because they're scared." "Why would they be scared of us?" "Because truth scares people who live by lies," I told him. I didn't react the way Patricia expected. I didn't get angry or threaten or even respond. I simply continued building my case, gathering evidence, and making calls to old FBI colleagues who now worked in housing discrimination and financial crimes. The annual HOA meeting was approaching, the one time each year when all residents could attend and vote on board matters. Patricia had scheduled it at an inconvenient time as usual, hoping for low attendance. I worked with Mike and other neighbors to ensure every resident knew about the meeting and understood its importance. We offered rides to elderly residents and childcare for parents. Meanwhile, I contacted James Turner, an FBI colleague who specialized in financial crimes. After reviewing my evidence, he agreed this went beyond HOA overreach into actual fraud. I prepared 3 packets of information. One for every resident, one for local media that I'd invited, and one for the FBI agents who would be on standby. The night before the meeting, Jacob helped me organize everything. "Is the HOA lady going to get in trouble?" he asked. "Yes," I said honestly. "Big trouble." "Because she hit me?" "Partly for that," I said. "But also because she's been hurting lots of families, not just us." "You thought about this?" "Good," he finally said. "She shouldn't be allowed to hit kids or hurt families." The community center was packed. Patricia looked surprised by the turnout but maintained her composure. She began with her usual self-congratulatory speech about maintaining community standards and protecting property values. When it came time for resident comments, I raised my hand. Patricia tried to skip me, but too many people noticed. "Mr. Cooper," she said with a tight smile, "please keep your comments brief and relevant." I walked to the front of the room. "I'd like to discuss selective enforcement of HOA regulations as a means of harassment and property devaluation for financial gain." Patricia tried to cut me off. "That's not on the agenda." Section 5 of the HOA bylaws allows residents to bring forth concerns about board conduct, I said calmly. "I'm well within my rights." I distributed my information packets and began a presentation that laid out everything: the pattern of violations against certain families, the below-market sales, the connection to Blue Sky Properties. "This isn't just bad management," I concluded. "This is organized fraud and housing discrimination." Patricia's face had gone from confident to panicked. "These are baseless accusations." "Actually, they're extremely well-based," came a voice from the back. A woman stood up. "Christina Garcia. We sold our house last year after receiving 23 violations in 3 months. Mr. Cooper showed me the records. No one else in the neighborhood received more than 2 in that same period. Another person stood. Thomas Wilson. You denied my father's wheelchair ramp 3 times, calling it an eyesore. That's ADA discrimination. One by one, residents stood up to share their experiences. Patricia looked around frantically, seeing her support evaporating. And beyond all that, I said when the room quieted, there's the matter of physical assault on a minor. The video of Patricia slapping Jacob played on the projector. Gasps filled the room. This meeting is adjourned, Patricia shouted, grabbing her purse. That's when the doors opened and 3 people entered, 2 FBI agents in suits and a police officer. Patricia Richardson, one agent said. We have some questions about Blue Sky Properties and your HOA financial records. Patricia and her husband were arrested 2 weeks later on multiple charges: fraud, housing discrimination, financial misconduct, and in her case, assault on a minor. The evidence was overwhelming. The HOA board was dissolved and reformed with new leadership committed to fairness. All the selective fines were invalidated, and families who had been forced to sell were contacted about potential legal remedies. The neighborhood changed almost overnight. Kids played outside again. People waved and stopped to chat. Several families who had felt unwelcome told me they now felt part of a community for the first time. At the first meeting of the new HOA board, they voted to create inclusive guidelines that specifically protected residents with disabilities and eliminated the petty restrictions Patricia had used to target families. We want Oakwood Estates to be a place where everyone belongs, the new president said. No exceptions. Jacob's confidence returned slowly. He set up his telescope in the front yard again. He built a new solar system model, even better than before, and several neighbors came to see it and praised his work. The final piece came 6 months later at Patricia's sentencing hearing. Jacob asked if he could attend, and after making sure he understood what it was, I agreed. Patricia looked much smaller in her plain clothes, without her usual perfect hair and makeup. When the judge asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, she turned toward us. I'm sorry, she said, though it sounded more resigned than sincere. I didn't understand. The judge gave her 18 months with possibility of parole, plus community service working with special needs children. Her husband received 2 years for the financial crimes. As we left the courthouse, Jacob was quiet for a while. Then he said, she looked sad. Yes, I agreed. She probably is sad. Not because she hurt people, he observed, but because she got caught. Sometimes my son understands people better than they understand themselves. It's been a year since everything happened. Oakwood Estates is now a model community for inclusivity. Jacob is thriving in a place where he can be himself. The telescope is permanently set up in our yard, and neighbors often stop by for impromptu astronomy lessons from my brilliant son. I sometimes think about what I learned from this experience. As an FBI agent, I spent years protecting people from threats they could see: criminals, terrorists, fraudsters. But some of the worst threats come with smiles, clipboards, and the veneer of authority. What Patricia never understood was that when she slapped my son, she didn't just hit a child. She attacked everything I had sworn to protect. My FBI training gave me the tools to fight back, but it was my love for Jacob that gave me the reason. Tyler, Patricia's son, came by recently. He awkwardly apologized to Jacob and asked about the telescope. Now they occasionally look at stars together. 2 very different kids finding common ground under the same sky. The most important lesson? Sometimes the greatest act of protection isn't fighting the bad guys, it's creating a world where the bad guys can't win in the first place. As for Patricia? Last I heard, she's halfway through her community service, learning that the children she once called disruptive are actually teaching her more about humanity than she ever knew. She picked the wrong dad to mess with, but more importantly, she picked the wrong community to try to control.